I found a baby on our doorstep. No note, just a baby. I called my husband, shaking. He took one look and whispered, "That's Emily. Our daughter WHO went missing 2 years ago." I froze. He pointed to her neck, the same birthmark, the same bracelet. But where has she been? There wasn't a knock. No doorbell. No footsteps. Just the sound of the wind brushing leaves across the porch. I was coming downstairs, barefoot, holding my coffee, half awake. When I opened the front door to get the morning paper, I saw her, a baby, sitting quietly in a basket wrapped in a pink blanket that had little yellow suns stitched along the edges. She wasn't crying. She just stared up at me, blinking slowly, like she'd been waiting. My heart jumped. For a second, I thought maybe I was dreaming. I even looked around for a parent, a stroller, something. But there was nothing. No one on the street. No car driving away. Just this little girl sitting there like she belonged. I knelt down and touched the edge of the blanket. Her skin was warm, her cheeks rosy from the cold, but she didn't make a sound. She reached toward me with the tiniest hand, and that's when I saw it. A bracelet, a small silver band around her wrist, old, almost tarnished. My breath caught. I leaned in closer, staring at the engraving. And for a second, the world seemed to tilt. I knew that bracelet. I knew it down to the way the letter E curled in the word Emily. My hands began to shake. I whispered her name out loud. Emily? It felt like tasting something long lost. I lifted her into my arms, pressing her gently to my chest. She didn't resist. She didn't squirm or cry. She leaned her head against my collarbone like she remembered the shape of me. I could barely breathe. I rushed inside, one hand on her tiny back, the other fumbling for my phone. I dialed Grant and held the phone to my ear with my shoulder while holding her tighter, like she might vanish again if I let go. When he answered, I barely recognized my own voice. "Grant, you need to come home, right now." He didn't ask why. He heard something in me. Something I didn't even understand yet. It took him 11 minutes to get home. He burst through the front door, his jacket half-buttoned, face pale. He saw me standing in the living room holding her, and he froze. His mouth opened, then closed again. He stepped closer. "Where did you?" She was just there on the porch. No note. Just her. He didn't move right away. Just stared like the world had stopped and left him behind. Then slowly, he stepped forward. His hand brushed her cheek. She blinked up at him. That's when he whispered it. "That's Emily." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" He didn't answer right away. He pointed to her neck. The birthmark. I pulled the blanket down slightly and looked. Just beneath her right ear, slightly faded, was a small heart-shaped birthmark. Our Emily had the same one. I had kissed it every night she was alive and in our home. My knees went weak. Grant crouched down beside me. His hand found mine. "It's her. It's really her." Tears welled in my eyes, but I was too stunned to cry. I kept looking at the birthmark, the bracelet, her face. Her hair had grown out a bit darker, and her eyes were deeper. Older somehow, but it was her. Or it looked just like her. Still, doubt twisted in my stomach. How is this possible? Grant's voice cracked. "I don't know, but I know my daughter when I see her." I looked back at her. She was studying me with those brown eyes, the same eyes that used to watch me while I cooked breakfast, the same eyes that sparkled every time she ran to the swings in the backyard. I didn't know what to believe. But something inside me whispered the same thing Grant had just said. She's home. I pressed her close again. I could feel her heartbeat. It was steady and calm, like she wasn't scared at all, like she'd never left. But she had. 2 years ago, she vanished from our backyard during a summer barbecue. One moment, she was playing with bubbles, the next, gone. The police searched. Dogs were brought in. Flyers were posted. We cried until there were no more tears to shed. And now, this child, this baby, sat in our living room, wearing the same bracelet with the same birthmark, with eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. Brant stood up slowly. "We have to call someone." I nodded, but I couldn't move yet. Not with her in my arms. Not with her head resting just under my chin like she'd done when she was little and sleepy and warm from a nap. "I don't understand," I whispered. Grant stepped toward the hallway. "I'll get the phone." She shifted in my arms and reached up, her fingers brushing my necklace. She used to do that, always. Whenever I held her, the same motion. The same Emily. I held her tighter. And in that moment, I realized I was terrified. Because if this really was our Emily, then where had she been? And who had brought her back? Before the baby appeared on our doorstep, our house was silent in a way that never felt right. It didn't matter that the television sometimes murmured in the background or that the dishwasher hummed late into the night. The kind of silence that lived with us was heavier than sound. It was the silence of a missing child. Every corner of our home still carried her imprint, even after 2 years. Her bedroom door remained shut. Her favorite shoes stayed on the shelf by the coat rack. I couldn't bring myself to box up her drawings or fold away her tiny pajamas. My name is Lena Holloway. I used to be someone who smiled without forcing it. I was a preschool teacher before everything stopped. Grant, my husband, is a high school science teacher. We were the kind of couple people described as solid. We did all the things parents are supposed to do. We planned meals. We built a swing set in the yard. We read Emily bedtime stories under a sky projector that played soft music. We were careful. We were ordinary. And then, in a blink, we were no one's parents anymore. Emily disappeared on a sunny Saturday in August. It was during a neighborhood barbecue. We had a dozen people in the backyard. Neighbors, friends, a few toddlers running through sprinklers. One moment, she was blowing bubbles near the lilacs, and the next, she was gone. No scream. No sound of a struggle. We searched the entire yard within minutes. The police arrived before sunset. There were search parties and helicopters, thermal cameras and phone alerts. Nothing ever turned up. No ransom call. No suspicious van. No evidence. Just emptiness. That kind of loss doesn't fade. It stains every second. For weeks, I barely slept. I kept calling out her name at night, convinced I would hear her respond. I imagined her somewhere safe, with a kind stranger or a loving family. Then I imagined worse. Grant would hold me while I cried, but even he couldn't hide the truth. We were drifting. He still made us coffee every morning, still kissed my forehead before work, but his eyes were always searching, always tired. My mother, Doris, checked in every day. She brought casseroles and stayed even when I didn't want company. She insisted I leave the house once a week. "You're still breathing, Lena, and breathing is a start." I resented her for it, but I also needed her. The rest of the world kept moving. Seasons changed. Stores put out Halloween decorations, the school down the street welcomed a new class of kindergartners the fall Emily should have started. Her classmates moved on. We didn't. We couldn't. One afternoon, about 6 months after she vanished, I drove to a local Walmart just to feel something. I stood in the toy aisle running my fingers over plastic tea sets and tiny dolls. Then I saw a woman scolding her daughter for throwing a tantrum over a toy. I watched the mother pull the girl's arm hard and hiss something cruel under her breath. I froze. My chest tightened. And then I turned and left my cart behind. I couldn't be around other children. I stopped going to the grocery store. And quit my job. The only people I saw were Grant, Doris, and occasionally Janice, our neighbor from across the street. She brought us cookies now and then, asked questions too loudly, and always seemed a little too interested in what we were doing. Grant tried to help me hold on to hope. He built a tiny memorial bench in the backyard under the old tree swing. He put Emily's name on it with gold lettering. He said it wasn't a grave, it was a space for her. For when she comes back, he told me. I didn't answer him. But I started sitting there every evening. I watched the sun dip behind the fence line. I listened to the wind move through the trees. I waited for something, anything, to change. We had stopped talking about the day it happened. The details were burned into our minds, and repeating them felt like picking at open wounds. But every so often, Grant would whisper in the dark, "I should have checked the side gate. I should have kept watching her." I would reach for his hand, squeeze it, and say nothing. There was nothing to say. Our lives turned into patterns. Wake up, survive the day, sleep, pretend to sleep. I folded her laundry every week, even though there were no new clothes to wash. I dusted her bookshelf. I refilled the soap in her bathroom. I lived with the ghost of a 4-year-old girl who had once called me mommy. On the morning she came back, or seemed to. We weren't expecting anything. Grant had left early for work. I had just finished brushing my teeth and was about to make breakfast. There was no reason to open the front door, but I did anyway, as if some invisible thread tugged at me from the other side. And there she was, sitting in a basket like some strange miracle, not screaming, not frightened, just watching. In that instant, everything shifted. The silence that had haunted our home for 2 years cracked open, and what poured in wasn't peace or closure. It was confusion. It was hope twisted with fear. It was the return of a child who had vanished without a trace and who now sat calmly at our door like she had never left. I didn't know what would happen next. I only knew the air felt different, heavier, electric, and my heart had already decided, long before my mind could catch up, that somehow, impossibly, this was Emily. I carried her inside, still cradling her in my arms like she might vanish again if I blinked. The house was quiet, too quiet for a moment like this. I laid her gently on the couch and stepped back, not sure what I was supposed to do next. She looked around the room with slow, cautious eyes, as if trying to remember something. Her gaze paused on the framed family photo above the fireplace. In it, Grant and I were standing on the beach, Emily's little arms around both our necks. She had sand all over her cheeks and a wide toothy smile. The girl on the couch stared at that photo without blinking. My stomach twisted. Grant hovered by the kitchen counter, gripping his phone. He looked at me like he was waiting for permission to speak. Should we call someone? The police? A doctor? I didn't answer. I knelt beside the couch instead. The girl reached for the hem of my shirt and held it gently in her hand. It was something Emily used to do whenever she was sleepy or scared. That simple touch felt like a quiet scream. We need a doctor, I said. Not the police, not yet. Grant nodded and called Dr. Patel, our old family pediatrician. We hadn't spoken to her in over a year. She listened patiently as Grant explained what happened. She didn't say we were crazy. She didn't dismiss us. She told us to bring the child in that afternoon and promised a full exam. While we waited for the appointment, I tried to feed her. I warmed up a bottle, then offered her a spoonful of applesauce. She hesitated, but eventually took a bite. Then another. Her appetite was gentle, slow, like she hadn't eaten anything warm in days. Her silence lingered, but her eyes kept scanning the room like it was familiar. She touched the blanket on the couch, the edge of a photo frame, the base of a lamp. She picked up a stuffed rabbit from the corner basket. It was Emily's favorite. Her tiny hands gripped it tightly and she brought it to her face, burying her nose in the fur. She remembers, I whispered. Grant sat down beside me, resting a hand on my back. His face was pale, or she's just drawn to soft things. Kids are like that. She knows this house, I said. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch when we brought her in. Look at her. She's not confused. She's home. We both fell silent, watching her cradle the rabbit against her chest. Then she picked up a crayon from under the coffee table, something Emily used to drop and forget. She walked over to the far wall and began to draw. I nearly burst into tears at the way she crouched, tongue slightly sticking out, focused like nothing else existed. That was exactly how Emily used to draw, so intense, so serious. When she stepped aside, I walked over to look. My breath caught. There was a red door in her drawing, one with black lines across the middle like bars. Beside it, she had drawn a woman with yellow hair and no face. Next to her was a cage. Inside it, a small child. Grant came up behind me. What is that? I don't know, I said, but she remembers something. The rest of the day felt slow and fragile. Dr. Patel examined her carefully. She asked questions gently, but the child wouldn't speak. She didn't resist. She let the doctor check her ears, her reflexes, her heartbeat. Everything seemed physically normal. No bruises, no visible signs of abuse, but there was a stillness in her, a guarded calm that no child should carry. Dr. Patel sat with us afterward and folded her hands. She looks like Emily, she said quietly. And you say the birthmark matches. The bracelet too. That's enough for me to order a DNA test. It'll take a few days. Grant asked the one question neither of us had said out loud yet. If it's not her, then who is she? The doctor didn't answer that. She didn't need to. We went home with a hollow kind of hope, a hope built on memories and shadows. The child held my hand the whole drive back. She didn't ask where we were going. She didn't ask anything. She just stared out the window like she was waiting for a sign she could trust. That night, I gave her a bath. She didn't fuss. She sat still, watching the water swirl around her legs. When I reached for the shampoo, she looked up and said a word, quiet and breathy. Bunny. I froze. My hand stopped moving. What did you say? I asked. She looked away, her eyes wide, but she said nothing else. I wrapped her in a towel, carried her to the spare room, and tucked her in beside the stuffed rabbit. She didn't cry when I left. She closed her eyes and held the toy tight. I went downstairs and found Grant standing in the dark staring at the front door. If that's Emily, he said. Someone had her. Someone brought her back. I nodded. And they're still out there. He looked at me, his voice steady. We can't tell anyone yet. Not until we know. We keep her safe. I agreed. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know what kind of world she had just come from. But if she was our daughter, and deep down, I believed she was, then nothing mattered more than keeping her right here in this house with us. Whatever darkness had touched her life, it hadn't stolen everything. She remembered enough to come home. The next morning, the weight in my chest had changed. It wasn't grief anymore. It was a raw, pulsing need to protect. Everything she did only deepened that feeling. When I entered the room, she was already awake, sitting up in bed with the stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. She didn't speak, but her eyes followed me. I offered her toast with strawberry jam, and she took it carefully, like she hadn't been given choices in a long time. Grant watched from the hallway, his arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't ready to believe completely, but he wasn't walking away either. That was his way. Quiet, methodical, always watching for the facts to fall into place. But facts hadn't brought our daughter home. A basket had, a blanket had, a bracelet, and a birthmark had. After breakfast, we sat in the living room while the girl colored in silence. I couldn't keep calling her the child or the girl. It felt wrong. So I asked her softly, "What's your name?" She didn't answer. I tried again. "Is your name Emily?" Her crayon paused, but she didn't look at me. Grant sat forward. "Do you remember us?" No reply. Her little hand stayed still. But then, without speaking, she reached into the couch cushions and pulled out a plastic dinosaur Emily had hidden there a year before. She set it beside her drawing without even looking. My throat tightened. That moment pushed us over the edge. I stood up and grabbed my purse. "We're getting answers today. We're not waiting on the mail or the lab schedule. I don't care if I have to beg someone." Grant followed me out to the car, buckling her into the back seat without a word. We drove straight to a private DNA testing center an hour away. I had called ahead, crying into the phone until the receptionist agreed to squeeze us in. She must have heard something in my voice, something that made her understand this wasn't a normal request. At the clinic, a nurse took cheek swabs from me, Grant and the girl. They said the rush results would take 48 hours. I couldn't wait 2 days. I didn't want to go home and sit with more questions. But we had no choice. We spent the rest of the day walking the neighborhood. We kept our heads down and our hands close. I carried her through the grocery store, bought her a pair of shoes, and let her pick a small toy. She chose a red truck with chipped paint. Emily had once picked the same model on a rainy day at the hardware store. I asked again, gently, "Emily, do you remember the red door you drew?" Still silence. But at bedtime, while I tucked her in, she spoke without looking at me. Just one sentence. "The red door doesn't open from the inside." I froze. My hand stayed on her blanket, fingers curled tight. "What do you mean?" She closed her eyes. "It locked." That was all she said. Nothing else came. But I didn't press her. I sat beside her until she fell asleep. Then I went downstairs and told Grant. He looked shaken, the color draining from his face. "She was locked in somewhere. She remembers. We have to tell someone," I said. "The FBI? The police? Somebody." He hesitated. "What if that puts her in more danger? What if whoever had her knows she's back?" I wanted to argue, but he was right. If someone had kept her hidden all this time, they might still be watching. Dropping her on our doorstep didn't mean they were done. It could have been a warning, or worse, a test. We agreed to wait until the DNA confirmed what our hearts already knew. Until then, we would keep her close, watch for any signs, and quietly search for information. I started by calling Dr. Patel the next day to tell her about the red door and the drawing. She listened carefully, then lowered her voice. "Lena, there was a report last fall. A woman named Clara Monroe, she used to work at a birthing center upstate, disappeared suddenly. She was under investigation for forging adoption papers. The farmhouse she used to visit matches your daughter's drawing. What happened to her?" "She vanished before they could charge her." I wrote her name down, fingers trembling. Clara Monroe. The first thread that led anywhere. I didn't know what it meant yet, but it connected to something real. Back at home, I found the girl sitting by the window, staring out at the mailbox. I sat beside her and asked, "Do you remember a lady with yellow hair?" She nodded once. "Did she keep you safe?" The pause lasted longer this time. She said not to talk. That was all she gave me. But it was enough. When Grant came home from work, I told him everything. He went straight to the garage and locked every door, every window. He brought in the security cameras we hadn't used since Emily vanished. That night, he stayed up watching the feeds, checking each angle like a man preparing for war. I didn't sleep either. I lay in bed with the monitor on full volume, listening to her steady breaths from the room across the hall. 2 days later, the DNA lab called. I was pacing the hallway, phone pressed to my ear. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "We have your results, Mrs. Holloway. The child is a biological match. She is your daughter." I stopped moving. The world shifted under my feet. My knees bent and I sat on the floor, hands shaking, eyes wet. She was ours. Emily had come home. And now that we knew for sure, we had one question left to answer. Who took her, and why did they bring her back? The news settled over our house like the first heavy snow of winter, quiet, thick, and impossible to ignore. Emily was ours. The test confirmed it. Her DNA matched mine and Grant's with no room for doubt. I should have felt peace, but instead, I felt the pressure building behind my eyes and in my chest because now we had a truth. Now we had a daughter, and now we needed answers. Grant stared at the printed results for what felt like hours. The black and white report trembled slightly in his hands. He kept rereading the same line. Probability of maternity and paternity, 99.9%. When he finally looked up, his eyes were glassy. "It's her. All this time, we've been mourning her. She's been alive." He folded the paper and pressed it against his heart. I wanted to wrap him in my arms, but I couldn't move. I kept thinking about the red door, the woman with yellow hair, the word locked. Emily, our Emily, was home. But someone had taken her. Someone had held her in a place she could not leave. She wasn't just a lost child. She had survived something. That night, I waited until she was asleep. Then I went into her room and sat on the floor beside her bed. I watched her breathe. I traced the curve of her cheek with my eyes. She looked so peaceful now, but there was something behind that calm, a quiet kind of fear that hadn't left since she arrived. I reached for her bracelet and gently turned it. The inside was scratched up, but one part was still clear. "Emily Joy Holloway," I whispered. "You're safe now, baby. No one will take you again." In the morning, Grant and I sat at the kitchen table while Emily colored in silence nearby. He spoke first. "We can't keep this to ourselves. She remembers things that matter. Someone needs to answer for what happened." I nodded. "I already called the detective on her case. She's meeting us today." Detective Kara Simmons arrived just after lunch. She'd been assigned to Emily's disappearance from the start. Back then, she'd done everything by the book. Interviews, search warrants, background checks. But nothing had turned up. Now she looked older, her expression heavier. "Where has she been?" Kara asked quietly, watching Emily through the kitchen doorway. "We don't know yet," I said. "But she's remembering things." Grant brought out her drawings. The red door, the cage, the faceless woman. Kara's eyebrows knit together. "There's a farmhouse we investigated 2 years ago. Burned out structure. No evidence. Just old rumors and an anonymous tip we couldn't trace." Emily looked up when she heard the word farmhouse. She climbed down from the chair and walked over to Kara. She didn't speak, but she placed a new drawing on the table. This one was different, more detailed. It showed the inside of a small room. One window, a small bed, a wooden crate beside it. A woman standing in the corner with yellow hair and a long dress. Her face had no eyes. Kara looked at us. "She's drawing her memory." "That woman might be Clara Monroe." "She mentioned that name," I said. "Our doctor told us Clara was being investigated for illegal adoptions, that she disappeared." Kara pulled out her notebook. "I think it's time we look harder, and I think we need to visit that farmhouse again." We agreed. The next day, while my mother stayed with Emily, Grant and I drove with Kara 2 counties over. The farmhouse stood on a patch of dry land surrounded by old fences. The wood was gray and splintered. The front door hung slightly open, its red paint faded but still visible. I stood there, heart racing, remembering the red door in Emily's drawing. Inside, the air smelled of rot and dust. Broken furniture littered the floor. In one corner, we found a small room with no doorknob on the inside, just a bolt on the outside and a child's blanket in the corner. Kara took photos. Grant stood frozen. I turned slowly, letting the space press into me. This was it. Emily had been here. Then we found something else. Hidden under the floorboards was a box filled with documents, falsified birth certificates, names scribbled out in one photo, a woman with yellow hair wearing the same dress from Emily's drawing. Kara held the photo carefully. "That's Clara. She's not just missing. She was running." Later that week, federal agents took over the case. They connected Clara Monroe to a trafficking ring based across several states. They believed she had taken Emily either for adoption or ransom that never happened. No one knew why Emily was returned. The theory was that Clara got scared, panicked, and dropped her off anonymously. But Emily had survived. However Clara had treated her, she had fed her, clothed her, and kept her hidden. That night, after the agents left, I sat with Emily in her room. I asked gently, "Do you remember the woman who brought you here?" She nodded slowly. "Why did she let you go?" Emily whispered. "She said I needed to go home. She said I had been brave." I brushed the hair back from her forehead and kissed her temple. "You were brave," I said. "And you're safe now." Emily reached out and placed her hand over mine. "She was scared too," she whispered. I didn't know what to make of that, but I knew what mattered most. Emily was in her bed. Her nightlight was glowing. The darkness was outside our house now, not within it. Grant stood at the door watching us. His eyes were tired, but his smile was real. Our daughter was home. Now we just had to teach her what it meant to be free again. The house was no longer quiet. It breathed again. There were small footsteps in the hallway, a light in the morning when Emily played with her toys, soft laughter that came and went like the breeze. But even as her voice returned, even as she began calling me mommy again in quiet moments, I knew we weren't returning to the life we lost. We were starting a new one, different in ways that touched everything. The world had kept turning while she was gone. Her room had remained the same, but she had not. She didn't remember her favorite cartoon. She no longer asked for the songs she used to sing. She didn't recognize our dog from a picture, but she remembered our faces. She remembered the comfort of her bed, the smell of lavender on her pillow, the feel of my hand in hers. Some memories had survived, and they were enough to begin. We started therapy with a child trauma specialist. Emily didn't speak much at first. Her drawing still carried shadows, dark lines, Small figures, closed doors, but she began to share. Slowly, she explained that Clara had told her to call her mama and warned her not to speak when men came to the house. Clara, it seemed, had both protected her and kept her hidden. She had fed her, kept her clean, but never let her outside. The farmhouse had a locked window and a single light bulb in the ceiling. Emily thought all homes were that way until she came back. One afternoon, after a long silence, she whispered something to me that I haven't forgotten. She cried too, at night. "Clara?" I asked. Emily nodded. She cried when she thought I was sleeping. It struck me hard. There was pain there, buried under layers of wrong choices. Clara wasn't just a monster, she was also broken. That didn't excuse what she did, but it made the story more complicated than I wanted it to be. Clara was never found. The FBI issued warrants, followed every lead, and searched nearby towns. It was as if she had vanished into the same air from which Emily returned. But we had evidence now. Other families were coming forward. Stories that had once gone ignored were being revisited. Emily's return sparked something larger than just our home. It became the beginning of justice, even if not yet complete. Grant and I didn't speak much about what might have happened if Emily hadn't come back. It was too much to hold. Instead, we focused on building the life we now had. He took a leave from work and stayed home, walking Emily to the park, helping her ride a small bike with training wheels. She laughed the first time she wobbled forward without falling. It was the first time we heard her laugh out loud since she returned, and both of us cried behind our sunglasses. My mother came over every weekend. She brought Emily coloring books and always made a point to say, "You're strong, baby. You're so strong." Emily would nod, like she understood strength didn't always look loud. The neighborhood changed too. Janice moved away a month after the news broke. We never got answers about her involvement, but her quick departure raised more questions than it answered. No one missed her. Instead, neighbors started checking in more, offering meals, helping us clean up the backyard Emily used to play in. People came together. Pain had carved a space, and now something kinder was growing there. We didn't reopen Emily's missing persons file. We closed it, officially. The local paper ran a story. Missing child returned after 2 years. Family reunited. Mystery deepens, but they didn't know the real story. They didn't see the way she curled up on my lap when the lights were low. They didn't see how she clutched the rabbit when she slept or how she still looked over her shoulder in crowded places. Emily was healing. That was the truth that mattered most. Not all the pieces had to fit neatly. We were allowed to move forward with some cracks still showing. Life didn't promise neat endings. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, she reached up and touched my cheek. "Are you going to stay here forever?" she asked. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "You're home and I'm right here." She nodded, then closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed and her small hand held onto my sleeve. I sat beside her until the room fell quiet, watching the soft rise and fall of her chest. Downstairs, Grant waited with 2 cups of tea. We sat on the porch, the wind brushing the trees. The sky was a deep shade of blue, stars starting to prick the darkness. "She's going to be okay," he said. I nodded. "So are we." We didn't say more. We didn't need to. There are some stories that begin again where you thought they ended. Ours did. Not in grief, not in despair, but in a quiet moment on a front porch where the world kept turning and a little girl slept safely in her room. She had come back and so had we. Thank you for watching our story. Emily's return changed everything. But it also taught us that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing love even when the road back is hard. If this story touched you or if you've ever held on to hope when the world told you not to, know that you're not alone. If you want to see more real-life inspired stories like this, full of emotion, mystery, and moments that stay with you, make sure to like the video. Leave a comment with your thoughts or questions, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next chapter. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that matter. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and remember, sometimes the most powerful moments come quietly, right when you least expect them.